Techlandia is recorded at the Central Office on the East Side in Portland. Central Office is a one stop for all your office or meeting needs. Check them out at centraloffice.com.
Welcome to the latest episode of Techlandia, Tao's regular podcast series. I'm Skip Newberry, President and CEO of Tao. And with us, we're pleased to have as our guest, Jared Emmerd with Oregon Tech. Jared, thanks for being here.
Hey, Skip. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about construction and the role of technology in that, and also what you're seeing in the industry broadly here in Oregon, especially in the context of your role running the construction management program at Oregon Tech. But before we do that, I wanted to first ask, what if you could take us maybe from your beginnings professionally to present day, what does that journey look like?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. My dad was a contractor, actually. So I grew up with a hammer in my hand. Some of my earliest memories, I was on a construction job site, and I'd be pushing a broom or carrying wood. And I still remember like the first day that my dad said, "Hey, you can carry more than one stick of lumber at a time." So just those memories are really ingrained in me early on of just what it's like to be on a job site, what it's like to see a home go up. My father did mostly new construction, residential. He'd do spec homes and custom, kind of both depending on the market. So a lot of my really early, I'd even say professional years were developed very young with my father there. So I really owe him a lot just in what he taught me there. I've been an Oregonian all my life. So I grew up in the Sherwood area. But when I was a young teen, my family moved to a little town called Chiloquin, which of course nobody would know where that is. It's a population of like 700 people. But what's unique is that it's close to Oregon Institute of Technology. And so when I started looking for good schools for an undergrad degree, I was, of course, interested in the school. So I teach at Oregon Institute of Technology now, but I actually am alum from here as well. Years ago, I went through the operations program here as well as getting a marketing degree. And operations to me was really kind of this merger between the engineering world, because I really enjoy math. I like things that make sense, but I also like people. And so it was the kind of the merger between engineering and management. And we didn't have a construction management program at that time. Otherwise, I would have been in that. But that has more recently changed. So let's see. So I graduated, and one of the interesting things that's just kind of really seared in my mind was I remember leaving the school and thinking to myself, when I graduated, I thought I was going to know a lot more than I feel like I do, which is a little bit ironic. Like I just had this image of like knowing everything that there was to know when I got my degree, right? But I didn't feel that way. What was interesting though was that for everything that I did thereafter, I found I was much more prepared than I thought. And so that was just kind of one of those interesting experiences where I kind of started to learn that it's not about how much you know so much as what you're willing or able to do. And I think that really ties into maybe more so now. And I tell this to my students all the time, right? Knowledge is cheap. It's very accessible, and maybe we'll have more conversation about that later. But so anyway, so there I am going into the world of industry, feeling like I should know a lot more than I do. But my journey professionally kind of took me first to working with a company that did lean, or I should say process improvement consulting is really what they did. If you're familiar with like the Lean Six Sigma methodology, a lot of it was based there. But the idea was to take operations or the way that we make things and make it better, to lean out the waste, right? Which that topic is extremely applicable when we look at construction, because construction tends to be an industry that kind of lags behind in the use of technology and also in kind of productivity methodologies. But anyway, early in my career, I got some exposure there, working with a great little company in Southern Oregon, but decided that the west side of the hills was a little warm for me. moved back to the east side of the hills, which felt more like home, worked in residential construction for a little while, and then went back into production management. And I worked as a, a production supervisor, a value stream manager for a wood products industry in Klamath Falls for one of the production facilities here. And for me, I would have to look at my life and say that those were some of probably the years where I grew the most, right? If you really want to test yourself and learn about people and learn about your limits, frontline management is a just a great way to do it. So challenging years for me, but I grew a lot, learned a lot through that time. And it was actually during that time I would say that I started to discover a lot of my passion, and that really came out of when we would have new employees join the company, and lots of times I would get to be part of their onboarding process. And so the when we'd have somebody new come in and they join my department, I'd get to spend a day or two with them, kind of walking them around, orienting them to what we do, why we do it, why it's important, how to do that safely. And I loved it. What I started to notice was that I built rapport with these individuals, and I could see the influence of what I had taught them, or in some cases what I had failed to teach them, kind of carry out throughout their career while they worked and grew with us. And I felt like that was so rewarding, right? This idea that I can only do so much in life, but when you actually invest in somebody else instead of investing in a thing, you can kind of duplicate yourself to a certain degree unendingly. And so it started to dawn on me then that, you know, education, or higher education in particular, like that's what you would do for a living, is invest in other people so that they can carry on what you've learned into their life and into their career. And that was really exciting to me. So went back to school, got my master's, started teaching at Oregon Tech, my alma mater, and really at the time teaching primarily operations management, right? So the systematic removal of waste from processes. Really enjoy really enjoy this school. The students that I get to work with are very practically minded for the most part, right? Like they're here because they want to learn, because they want to pick up practical skills, and that just makes every day really interesting. But kind of moving up to the present day, the kind of the recent thing on the burner has been that we have recently launched a new program at this school, and it's construction management, kind of a merger of a lot of different things that we already do at Oregon Tech. But of course, that fits kind of right with my background and a lot of my passion. So I'm kind of in the middle of that, building that program up right now.
Nice. I was wondering if you could maybe also spend, a few minutes here just telling us a little bit about the program. Like, what are the various components, and also, like, what does ultimate success look like for a typical student coming out of that program?
Yeah. I'm going to try to answer your last question first, actually. Ultimate success, that's a big idea. I think that most of our students are coming in with the idea that landing a good career job is success. As an instructor, I see it a little bit differently. There are a lot of paths that lead to jobs, but that isn't necessarily ultimate success. I think the way that I view it is more that we want to produce professionals who are passionate for what they do. And so if we can turn students out from Oregon Tech that are excited and curious about what they're going to do for the rest of their life, I think that is probably a good measure of ultimate success. But looking at the program and how do we get there? Oregon Tech has always been known as we're a polytechnic university, which means we're really training for industry, right? So we're not necessarily trying to be just a knowledge hub. We want knowledge that can be applied and that is applied through our students while we're here. So as we're building this program, we're really looking at how do we weave that into everything that we do, right? We don't want to just know about construction methodology. We want our students to put their hands on it, to build with different tools, to go and see it in the field and see how, building information modeling is being translated into a tangible product, etc. So I'd say that that's one of the things that kind of underpins everything that we do as we build this program. What kind of skills do we teach in it? Well, it's a construction management program. So, as part of that, we believe that a construction manager or a project manager, their job really is people, it's communication, it's leadership, it's holding together all the parts of a large project. So, we teach everything from supply chain management to accounting to leadership principles. We are teaching our students about materials. We're teaching our students about geographic information modeling and surveying. We're teaching our students about scheduling and cost estimating. And those are kind of just a little sampling of what is inside the program. But I think that the third thing that I would highlight about the way that the program is built is that we have myself and the other faculty who teach within the program, really we come out of industry and we have a real belief that there are some things that you cannot teach, and you need to spend time in the field, you need to spend time doing it. And so there are multiple internships that are actually integrated into this curriculum. So part of your education is to have time to have a job with a real company doing real work, and that starts actually early in your career. At the end of your sophomore year, in that first or that second summer rather, you'd be working with a construction company, and then bringing that experience back to the school actually to really heighten your education in the last couple of years. So I'd say that those are probably three things that are pretty unique about the program.
That's great. And based on your description, it sounds like there's a number of areas that touch upon technology as critical skills to effective construction management roles. And I imagine that's just accelerating at a pretty fast clip these days.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch actually. I mentioned it before. Historically, the construction industry has been kind of slow to adopt technology. There's kind of the stigma of we've been building homes for thousands of years. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
But I think that we're starting to realize that, maybe it is broke, right? If we just look at the affordability problem just for housing in the United States, that alone would trigger us to think, maybe we need to make some changes, right? There is actually a lot of technology that's making an entrance into the construction industry. Maybe only a few that we're really starting to see widespread adoption, but a lot that are on the horizon that have the potential to really revolutionize that sector, I think.
Yeah, I know that over a lot of years during the existence of Tao, we've had a number of member companies in kind of the construction management software and design space, whether Autodesk or Trimble and formerly
Hmm.
Viewpoint construction software. But now I look at companies too that we work with, like Hoffman Construction, and they're increasingly a tech company in many respects, whether it's like
Hmm.
site safety and use of drones, or how they're leveraging data from throughout all of their supply chain to again look for efficiencies and all of that. As you think about the types of skills, the building blocks that someone who might want to pursue construction management as a career, what would you say to them if they're in the K through 12 system? Like, what should they focus on in preparation for a program like yours at Oregon Tech?
That's a great question. And I'm going to say that it's probably not skills. And this is the same thing that I actually tell my students, is that someday a company is going to hire you not for what you know, but for who you are. And so I think that advice would hold true at a pre-undergraduate level as well. Is think about the way that you carry yourself, the way that you communicate. Think about building critical thinking and analysis skills. Creativity, I think, is another thing that we really I would encourage fostering, because I think that we're really on the edge of some transformation in the industry where doing things new and differently might be more accepted than we've seen in the past.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, I mean, back to something you said earlier in the conversation, knowledge is cheap. It's almost like you're saying experience is invaluable, or at least more valuable. And you also just referenced what I have heard frequently described as human skills, right? So it's, how to communicate effectively, how to, have demonstrate critical thinking, lifelong learning, empathy with others. So, I mean, recognizing signal from noise, So I'm wondering if you could how has that worked into the curriculum for the construction management program?
Yeah, great question. So being a 4-year institution, this is a 4-year program. We weave what we consider kind of general skills into every one of our degrees. So there's a certain number of communication classes, speech classes, writing classes. We teach humanities. We teach a little bit of science. So the idea would be that as an individual, you get a little taste of everything, and to kind of lay the base work for becoming a professional. But then inside of that, this program is actually housed in the business management department. So there's this uh, core set of courses that we teach to anyone who's getting a degree from the management department. And of course, management is just the idea, kind of simply defined, it's getting work done through other people, which is exactly what a construction manager has to do, right? Typically, a construction manager doesn't do much of the building themselves, but they make sure that the whole thing comes together. And so, as part of that core, I think I mentioned some of them earlier. We teach human resources, we teach leadership classes, we're teaching, gosh, what are some other human ones that are inside management? But those kind of courses, right? So there's this there's this bed work that says we're not just going to teach you technical skills. We're going to teach you how to grow and develop as an individual. And I think that was one of the things that was kind of an aha moment for me in my career was when I was earning my degrees, I kind of felt like, man, why am I taking these classes? Like I just want to study operations and efficiency. Like that's my bread and butter. But ironically, it was a lot of the supportive skills that I learned from my time here that I think made me very adaptable and kind of able to be successful anywhere that I pivoted in my career after that.
Nice. And, in terms of some of the companies and other institutions that are involved in helping to support the program and fund it, like what are the things, what are the selling points to those organizations, and what are they hoping to get out of the program? And obviously they're hoping to get some talent, right? But beyond that, like what does success look like for them?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of our partners have probably different success expectations. One of the things that's unique here is that we have two tracks. One of them is in general construction or vertical construction, which is kind of what you typically picture first when you think of construction, right? Something getting built up off the ground. It's our homes, it's our apartments, it's our shopping malls, it's our skyscrapers, vertical construction. But there is a very large industry, the infrastructure industry, that really is focused on horizontal construction, or we might call that heavy civil construction sometimes. And so we have a track in that as well. And some of our supporters are particularly interested in seeing that developed, the heavy construction side. So we have a lot of scholarships that are going to students who are specializing in heavy construction or horizontal construction, largely because that's an industry that just gets missed, and they're looking to encourage people to think about careers that kind of fuel those heavy civil industries. What does ultimate success look like for them? I think that kind of we have to go back to one of the headwinds that the construction industry has right now, and that's that there is a not only a labor shortage, but there's also a skills gap in the construction industry. And it really goes back, boy, almost 20 years now. And I guess I would have been graduating around this time. But in the crash, the '08, '09 crash, a lot of people who would have been early in their construction careers decided this is not a stable industry for me, and got out. And we really saw that there was a very large period of time where we didn't have very many people going into the industry. And so that has been picking up in recent years, but there's kind of this big gap where where folks just don't think like, oh, construction is a good industry, right?
Right.
Or haven't thought that way for a long time, largely because we have this blip on the radar that was pretty bad for a lot of people who were in the construction industry. And so what that's led to is not only do have we been undersupplied for a long time, but our workforce is really aging as well. You have those who were well entrenched in construction before the '08, '09 crash, and then now they're nearing the end of their career, so they're really phasing out. And then you have everybody who came in like kind of after that stay away from construction wave passed, and they're very new in their careers, which is exciting, but at the same time, they don't have the same skills. So we have very few people who are kind of in that like, 15 to 30 years of experience range. And you know what, Skip, I forgot the question I was trying to answer with that, just because I think it's so fascinating.
No, no, I think I think you largely hit it. So that was good. And I also had another kind of follow-up question too that relates to this notion of experience, right? And you mentioned this gap of, people with 15 to 30 years of relevant experience. How much of your own kind of journey is kind of the new normal, right? Because you worked in a variety of different forms of construction, but also like in supply chain, right? I mean, you worked for a wood production facility, right? So you worked, kind of on the supplier side. And how important is it to understand some of the potential bottlenecks, opportunities for greater efficiency, the relationships, frankly, and the importance of that in ensuring a good product at the end? I mean, was wondering if that's more of a holistic approach that you all are focused on.
Absolutely. To the construction manager, that is more your bread and butter than, how big a beam needs to be. Your civil engineers need to know that. But as a construction manager, you need to know, are you going to have materials on site at the right time? And if not, how can you make up that time, right? And so juggling that iron triangle of we need to ensure that we create a quality product, but we also have to create it in a time window that works for our customer, and we need to create it for a cost that makes this project actually achievable. And so you're always balancing those three. And so the holistic mindset is, I mean, absolutely critical. And we've kind of built that into the program because this program is wide. It's because we totally believe what you just said, right? So students take courses in civil engineering. They take them from geomatics. They take them from specifically in construction management, but they also take them in general management. They also take courses in operations management. So I think I might have mentioned it before, but supply chain, of course, for everybody, not just the construction industry, but became like topic number one about 5 years ago. And that is, I think it was like an eye-opening experience for all industries. And now that's one of the big questions that the companies are asking is, are we sourcing things the right way? Are we even measuring the right indicators? Like maybe delivery speed is actually more important than we thought, right? And so are there
Hmm.
ways that we can start to scale or even scaffold the steps that are associated with construction? And so that's why we see, I think a lot more experimentation in modular building or mass timber building, and really trying to take a lot of that work that typically would have been done on a job site, and that you have to do one step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time. It didn't take so long and there's no way around that. Well, as soon as we pull that off the job site and we say, well, what if we could put these pieces together off-site in a very efficient manner and then just assemble them or put them together on site, and we could do it in a third of the time maybe, right?
Hmm. Yep.
And I think that's something that has a lot of potential. Of course, it doesn't work for everything, but it's a game changer for some types of construction.
And I think too, like one common question that I've been getting a lot of, just as a parent who works with a lot of tech companies, people have asked, like, how should I instruct my or and advise my kid to think about future careers? How do you kind of future proof to a certain extent with the increase in automation, with AI moving into the physical world in the form of robots, and et cetera, other forms of automation? There's always this risk that certain types of positions are going to be made there'll be fewer of them, if not
Hmm.
completely eliminated in some cases. And so
Hmm.
construction management is more the quarterback in all of this, right? So whether it's combination people plus, automated systems, et cetera, they're going to be managing all of that. So I'm wondering, what's your take, number one, on kind of that trend and the adoption curve? Like, where are we? And then number two, like, what do you tell, students who are looking to get into, construction? Like, where should they focus, or what should they think about? How should they conceptualize this?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question, and you mentioned AI, and I think that's on the top of everybody's mind is how is that going to change our industry, our jobs in the next 5, 10 years? Even how is it changing it right now, of course? And that's a conversation that I love to have very openly with my students. And I'll tell you a little bit about how we're approaching that. To looking at first of all, like what are we seeing being automated? I think you kind of asked that question,
Hmm.
and we're seeing a lot of the I'm going to say with traditional construction where you have site construction, and I'm not thinking so much in the modular design or building off site, but we can automate just about anything. But it typically doesn't make sense on a site. The only things that really make sense when you're on a site building are, like maybe we automate a crane here or there, but earlier on in the process, that a big part of the construction process that often gets overlooked is the design phase, and that can often account for half or more than half of a project phase. Is that you know if you're smart about it, you're going to spend a lot of work up front getting it just right because you don't want to build something and then think, gee, I would love to change that, right? Um,
Hmm.
so we're seeing a lot of that automation really working its way into that portion of the construction. So the design, testing, you can model uh, the you can model loads, but you can also model energy use. You can of course model different designs and site layouts, etc. And we can automate a lot more of that. Now, I'm not aware of say that scalping a lot of jobs away at this point. It's just giving us tools to do better and to do it
Hmm.
faster. But of course, anytime that there's better and faster, that means eventually you're going to need less labor who is kind of doing that, right? So that leads to the conversations that I've been having with my students. My AI policy in my classroom might be a little controversial, but my first point is AI, use it, right? They're, they're going to use it when they get out of my classroom. What I want is for them to be able to use it well. And uh, they're we're struggling to do that, to know what using it well looks like. And so what I'm trying to build into them is this idea that when I give a you work as a student, if you act as a conduit for knowledge, in other words, knowledge just flows from AI to me, or it doesn't have to be AI. If knowledge just flows from, Google to me, they haven't added any value to that.
Hmm.
And so when they go into industry, how long do you think it's going to take for their boss to figure out I could ask the same question of AI now that would have asked of them, right? So my challenge to my students has been kind of no matter what, you don't want to be an information conduit. You need to add value to information. And so typically that looks like contextualizing it, criticizing the information, so having a critical eye to know when information is questionable or should be. Uh, Sometimes organizing that information is a way of adding value. So I think that going back to your question of what does job security look like for anyone in a white collar position, I think it's really that. It's being able to if you are only an information conduit, you're at risk. So we need to learn to add value to information. I feel like you asked multiple questions and I probably only answered about half of one. Was there something else that I'm forgetting? That
No, it was really good. And I can see why, like, when looking at your background online, there's a lot of like, oh, Professor Emmerd was the best teacher I've had. That was one of the most articulate, concise explanations of, how to avoid becoming essentially a middle person in the flow of information, right? And I think that's broadly applicable across all sorts of fields and disciplines. And I haven't heard it quite put that way, but it was so intuitive. So I appreciate that. Hopefully people will stick with us in this episode and we'll have heard this by the end. But I also wanted to, as we start to wrap up a bit, what are some different resources that you rely on, whether it's podcasts or books you read that you think are worthwhile sharing with our listeners?
Yeah, in my line of work right now, Skip, I read a little bit of everything and a lot of nothing right now. So the sources that are important to me would be, I have news feeds from a company called Everstream Analytics, and they just report out on what's happening to the global supply chains like today, and
Mhm.
in particular, how they're going to impact the flow of possible critical goods and what you might do to avoid them, right? So that kind of news is important to me in what I do. The Engineering News Records is a publishes the BCI, the CCI, some of those indices that track construction costs. So I follow those indices because that's kind of important to what I'm doing. I like following the Home Builders Institute. I like following the Build Show. Just a lot of what are the emerging practices, what are best practices, so that I can bring those back to my classroom. But honestly, if I'm being honest with you, at this stage of my life, I am reading a lot of textbooks, which ironically, I almost don't. I employ very few textbooks in my classroom. And I think one of the interesting topics around that is that I find that typically I can find a very decent OER or open educational resource to replace a textbook. And I'm always very interested in that. If you're not familiar with open educational resources, they are, think of it like, at least in the academic world, professors who have written lots of times professors written their own textbook for a class, and then they just share it. They just make it publicly available. And so, of course, I'm interested in that because we're always trying to reduce the cost to our students. So I remember the hit that textbooks tended to be term after term. But even more interesting to me is that idea of like really opening up and sharing knowledge, right? So I really like the community and the mindset behind open educational resources that says, you know, Professor so and so from this college has this experience and these skills and puts it together uh, and then somebody over here from this university, and we can tap into all of that and we can share that. And so the community and the mindset that comes from OERs, to me, is really fun. So I spend a lot of time reading those.
No, that's great. I think if you didn't kind of like share stuff that was kind of industry or field specific, someone might say, well, okay, all right, well, what is this person really into? No, it's you're living construction management disciplines daily and absorbing all the related information. So that's great. Any kind of last words of wisdom as we wrap up?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, most wisdom that I have didn't come from me to begin with, so you can find it somewhere else. Trying to think if there's anything really valuable that we didn't get to talk about. We danced across technology earlier, and I don't know. I think being specific about that, I think we're going to see a lot more AR and VR, augmented reality, virtual reality, being used in the industry,
Mhm.
really to be more sure of what we're creating, particularly between the builder and the client relationship. It's also going to be really interesting to see where what we can do with 3D printing and doing that at scale. Of course, we're just dancing across that, and it probably won't replace traditional construction, but maybe it will replace specific construction or elements within a construction project. So I think that's another thing that we'll be watching over the next 10 years very, very closely. Yeah, just wanted to dance back to those two topics.
Excellent. But I think like, looking ahead to what trends you're paying attention to from a technology integration is kind of a perfect place to wrap it up. thank you so much for joining us. And I learned a ton on this call, so I appreciate it. And hopefully more folks, either they or their kids, might be inspired to pursue or consider at least a career in construction management after this conversation. So thank you again for spending some time with us and sharing your insights. We really appreciate it.
Great, Skip. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much.
That's a wrap on this episode of Techlandia, the podcast, where innovation meets insight. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow us, leave a review, and share it with your fellow tech explorers. You can follow us at techoregon.org for updates and more tech-fueled content. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep building the future.